thousands gathered near the White House and at the south lawns of the White House to witness history being made. There were more than 7,000 people, and for the first time, the gates of White House were opened for thousands of Indian Americans as Prime Minister Narendra Modi received a state welcome, a guard of honor at the White House with the US President Joe Biden there. Now, huge deals are likely to be signed, and this is something that is being seen as transformational in India-America relationship. How is this transformational and not transaction? During the course of the next 2 hours on this special broadcast from New Delhi and from Washington DC, we get you the latest. I'm Gaurav Sawant as always. Let's get started with the headlines on India First. Mega Modi-Biden bilateral meeting underway at the Oval Office at the White House. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says India working shoulder to shoulder with the United States for the benefit of humankind. The US President Joe Biden rolls out the red carpet for Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the White House. Biden calls ties with India the most defining relationship of the 21st century. And it's raining strategic deals in DC. India and the US to sign a mega fighter jet engine deal, semiconductor facilities to be set up in India. The Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, and NASA to carry out a joint manned mission into space in 2024. In other news, ahead of the mega opposition meet in Patna on Friday, discord in opposition unity. Aam Aadmi Party threatens the Congress either to back the ordinance or face boycott of the meeting. Karnataka government hikes power tariff by 30%. Protests erupt. A Bandh called. In his opening comments, Prime Minister Narendra Modi mentioned that he'd seen White House from outside about 3 decades ago. Today, he received a state welcome, a guard of honor at the south lawns of the White House. But he said the bigger story was that 7,000 people, for the first time ever, the gates of the White House were opened for such a large number of Indian Americans, for them to witness history. The US President Joe Biden, he's defined the India-America relationship as the most defining partnership of the 21st century. In fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his opening comments inside the Oval Office, specifically mentioned a statement that had been made by then Vice President Joe Biden in 2014, when he said that his effort would be to ensure America becomes India's best friend. And the Prime Minister said this is exactly what is giving strength to this relationship, that Biden is India's friend, India's well-wisher. And the part of this relationship comes from the 5 million strong Indian American community, the glue that binds the two countries together. Before I get you more on the story, let's quickly cut across and listen in to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's opening statement inside the Oval Office when the conversation started. The bilateral is currently underway.
राष्ट्रपति जी, मैं आपका हृदय से बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं और डॉक्टर जी बाइडेन का भी हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं, जिस प्रकार से आपने गर्मजोशी से मेरा और हमारे डेलीगेशन का स्वागत किया। और विशेष रूप से मैं आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं, आज आपने व्हाइट हाउस के द्वार भारतीय समुदाय के लिए खोल दिए और हजारों की तादाद में भारतीय समुदाय अमेरिका भारत की भावी रणनीति के साक्षी बनने के लिए आज हमारे बीच मौजूद थे। एक्सेलेंस, आप हमेशा भारत के एक बहुत अच्छे शुभचिंतक रहे और जब भी आपको जहां भी अवसर मिला है आपने हमेशा भारत और अमेरिका के संबंधों के महात्म्य को बहुत बड़ा बल दिया है, बहुत बड़ी ताकत दी है। और मुझे याद है कि 8 साल पहले यूएस इंडिया बिजनेस काउंसिल को संबोधित करते हुए आपने एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात कही थी और आपने कहा था, आवर गोल इज टू बिकम इंडिया बेस्ट फ्रेंड। ये आपके शब्द आज भी गूंज रहे हैं। भारत के प्रति आपकी यही व्यक्तिगत प्रतिबद्धता हमें अनेक बोल्ड और महत्वाकांक्षी कदम उठाने के लिए प्रेरित कर रही है। आज भारत अमेरिका स्पेस की ऊंचाइयों से समुद्र की गहराइयों तक, एंशियंट कल्चर से लेकर के आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस तक हर क्षेत्र में कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चल रहे हैं। डिप्लोमेटिक दृष्टि से जब किन्हीं दो देशों के बीच संबंधों की बात की जाती है तो अक्सर औपचारिक ज्वाइंट स्टेटमेंट, वर्किंग ग्रुप्स और एमओयू उसी के दायरे में आमतौर पर बातचीत होती है। इसका अपना महत्व है ही, लेकिन भारत और अमेरिका के रिश्तों का असली इंजन हमारे मजबूत पीपल टू पीपल संबंध है और इस इंजन की एक जोश भरी दहाड़ हमने अभी बाहर व्हाइट हाउस के लॉन पर भी सुनी है। एक्सेलेंसी, जैसा आपने कहा, मैं उसे फिर से दोहराना चाहूंगा, आज की तेजी से बदल रही वैश्विक स्थिति में सभी की नजर विश्व के सबसे 2 बड़े लोकतांत्रिक देशों पर है, भारत और अमेरिका पर है। मेरा मानना है कि हमारी स्ट्रैटेजिक साझेदारी मानव जाति के कल्याण के लिए, वैश्विक शांति और स्थिरता के लिए, लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों में विश्वास रखने वाली सभी ताकतों के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है और पहले से कहीं ज्यादा महत्वपूर्ण है। मुझे विश्वास है कि हम मिलकर पूरे विश्व के सामर्थ्य को बढ़ाने में अवश्य सफल होंगे। आज हमारी बातचीत में हम ऐसे ही कई मुद्दों पर बात करेंगे और अपने स्ट्रैटेजिक संबंधों को नए आयाम से जोड़ेंगे। मैं एक बार फिर आपको आपकी मित्रता के लिए हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
So not only was the red carpet rolled out for Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the White House, a lot of effort, a lot of thought has been put in on what to serve at that meal, who would the guests be, what kind of music would play. And it's being said that Dr. Jill Biden, the US First Lady, was personally involved in this planning. But the US President, Joe Biden, actually said this relationship is actually a defining moment, bending the arc of history for global good. So there is a meeting of the minds when it comes to India and the United States of America. This is a partnership that will benefit not just the people of India and the people of the United States of America, but this is to benefit humankind at large. And how? Let's listen in.
Over that past 10 years, those small steps have transformed into large progress. And today, the partnership between our countries is stronger than it's ever been. We see it in our major defense partnership, now a pillar of the Indo-Pacific peace and security structure. We see it in our economic ties and efforts to promote inclusive economic growth for our people and, quite frankly, people all around the world. And we see it in our growing cooperation on a whole range of issues in space, emerging technologies, clean energy, global infrastructure. I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for your decision and hosting the G20 this year and focusing the world on the challenges that matter not just to you and I and our country, but to all of us. I look forward to discussing how we can strengthen our partnership and build a future together worthy of both our peoples, one grounded on democracy, human rights, freedom, and the rule of law. So welcome again, Mr. Prime Minister. We have a big agenda to continue to build our progress, again, step by step, but continue to build.
So when you talk of the defense partnership, is this just about the sale of GEF 414 jet engines for the Indian Air Force or about the MQ-9B Sea Guardian unmanned combat aerial vehicles? Is this all about challenging China, or is there much more to this partnership? Because it's not just about defense, there's also space exploration, there's also critical and emerging technology cooperation, chip manufacturing, and a lot more. I bring you this report, and before I bring you this report, let's quickly cut across to Washington DC. Let's cut across to White House. India Today's news director Rahul Kanwal joins us with the latest. And Rahul, the bilateral meetings are on. There are great expectations from this meeting and from the outcomes, Rahul.
Oh, absolutely. The meeting's already run over the initial schedule, about 20 minutes late already. Where we are, just in front is where you enter for the press conference. We're told that there will be one question each, one from the American media, one from the Indian journalists, when the press conference begins, and then we'll have the joint statement which is put out, where we'll really see how these two countries have been able to bring together in text the agreements that they've reached, the kind of understanding that both countries have come to. Gaurav, I remember you had come with us in 2014 when we were here for Prime Minister Modi's visit.
Yes.
2015 when he'd come to the UNGA, Madison Square Gardens, and at that time you could have said that, okay, here's a leader who's just got elected. There is a certain novelty to him coming to the US, especially since he was denied a visa. None of the popularity that we saw then seems to have diminished. In fact, it's probably already grown. These were the lawns of the Bidens where they were chanting Modi, Modi. American journalists here quite amazed, bewildered by the kind of scenes that we were seeing. One of them, in fact, told me that the last time they saw something similar, Gaurav, was when the Pope had come to the White House. That's the only time they've seen something similar to the kinds of scenes we've seen at the White House today. This, make no mistake, is history being scripted live and in front of eyes, and that's the coverage that we're bringing together in New Delhi and in Washington DC. A new chapter being written in the relationship, in the ties between India and the US. And you've tracked, Gaurav, the light combat aircraft jet engines which we've struggled with. The Kaveri engine, for various reasons on account of its weight, unwieldiness, simply wasn't able to deliver the kind of bang that the Indian Air Force wanted. Many pilots were quite unhappy with the performance of the light combat aircraft in its initial avatar. Hopefully, with this transfer of technology from GE, the GE F414 jet engine should be able to really give the light combat aircraft the kind of airworthiness and the kind of combat capability that you'll need when you're going up against an F-16 in the case of the Pakistan Air Force, or in the case of the PLF, the Chinese Air Force. You would need the kind of technology that India is now being given access to, which it is denied so far. My big concern, I'm very curious to know what you think of this, Gaurav, is whether Hindustan Aeronautics will be able to deliver and execute on the technology that they're being given. You remember how Rafale, the manufacturers had concerns about our ability to be able to take that technology, deliver in real time, which kind of held up the contract before it became a government-to-government contract. It is what held up the contract initially because they were just not certain that HAL could deliver. Now they're getting this technology, different components of that technology. Will they then be able to assimilate it, deliver what they're being taught, and then even not just leave it where it is, but build on it and take it into the future by adding new layers of technology in the years to come, Gaurav?
Rahul, that's a very, very pertinent point that you raised there, because with that deal, of the UPA government, when it came to the Rafale, it got stuck because neither Hindustan Aeronautics Limited nor the manufacturers were willing to sign off. There was no clarity who would sign off on the final HAL manufactured Rafale jets, and it remained in limbo for an entire year. When the Modi government then took over, they then went in for a different deal, and that was precisely the reason how much of the technology can India assimilate. And I think that's one reason reason why in this G2G deal there is also, the private sector is also likely to be roped in. You'll be in a better position to tell us the nuts and bolts of that MOU that's been signed between HAL and General Electric for the GE 414 engines. But you're absolutely right, Rahul. These engines will be a game changer for India, especially when they're manufactured in India for the Indian Air Force, Rahul. But it's not just about the fighter jet engines. There's a lot more on critical and emerging technologies, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and that's where the role of Ajit Doval, our national security advisor, and in the case of the US, Jake Sullivan, becomes very crucial, because if these conversations were looked at purely from an external affairs or commercial, finance or industry, commerce perspective, then they're much tougher to come by. The moment there is a national security dimension, that's where Dr. Jaishankar and the Indian Ministry of External Affairs have been able to play this very smartly by giving it the national security dimension. A lot which would otherwise got held up in bureaucratic tangles here in DC, now getting expedited, and that's where ISET really has been a game changer. Not too many people know the nuances of ISET, but what I can broadly say is that it gives a framework where you're able to push through, and also it's not just the framework, it's also the reality of the threat posed by Beijing, which makes things critical for the US as well, because you want to muscle India out militarily if there is at all any counterbalance to Chinese hegemony in the Asian continent. It can only be in the form and shape of India. The other countries in Japan and South Korea are great friends of India, and those are relations the people of India and the governments of India will build on in the years to come, but they don't have the kind of population, the kind of might that a country like India has, especially the perpetuity value building out into the next 15-20 years, which is why it's also important for the United States at a time when it's facing these kind of challenges being posed by Beijing. It's important for the US also to ensure that India is capable of providing a security counter to China's nefarious designs in Asia and elsewhere, and in the Indo-Pacific. Gaurav.
Rahul, stay with me. Let me also introduce other guests on our broadcast. We have Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, former Kashmir Corps commander and someone who watches issues of national security and strategy very closely, joining us on the broadcast. Also with me is Sushant Sareen, senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, and India Today's national affairs editor and bureau chief Abhishek Bhalla joining us on the show. But before I come to our guests, Rahul, in case you have to go for this press conference and the meet. Okay, Rahul, I'm told, has already left. He has to go back. That bilateral meeting already overshot its schedule. But General Hasnain, let me begin by asking you, okay, Rahul, I'm told, is back. Rahul, the big takeaways from this meeting, and especially when we talk of critical and emerging technologies and the deals that are happening, especially in space, a manned mission to space by 2024, Rahul, that would be big. Okay, I'll try and reestablish that link, but General Hasnain, is China the glue that brings India and America together, or is China one aspect? There is much more that brings the two countries together, sir.
Thank you, first of all, Gaurav. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be on your show. If you had asked me this question 5 years ago, I may have dilly-dallied, I may have spoken in the grey zone, but today when you ask me this question, I speak in the positive. Ever since the events of 2020 April, there is an element of greater seriousness. In fact, I would take this back even to Doklam 2017. There is a level of seriousness that China's intent against India seems to have arrived, the actual intent against India, and that is to browbeat India, show it as if it is in the second place in Asia and in the international environment, and that if it decides to join the other forces led by the United States, then India would cut a sorry figure somewhere. Now that kind of an attitude which it adopted obviously led India to start taking its threats much more seriously, despite the fact that we doubled our trade to $125 billion, much of it in favor of China. But despite that, we know that this is a two-track kind of a thing which is going on. On one side, a a trade which is progressing, and the other side, China, trying to make sure that India does not emerge as a competitive neighbor. They're trying to browbeat India on the border, trying to second case it, and also to try and impact its strategic confidence. All this, when you see together, you see that India, the emerging Indo-US relation today, is one of the major triggers for this, has been the cascade of events from April 2020 right till 2022-23.
So if China wanted to browbeat India, Sushant Sareen, clearly China appears to have failed, because India is actually, as is argued, looks for an opportunity in an adversity. Aapada mein avsar, and getting the GE 414 engines or the Sea Guardian drones, or space technology, critical and emerging technologies, semiconductors being made in India, all of this is actually disadvantaged China.
Yeah, but Gaurav, I would say that the relations between India and the US have been a work in progress over the last almost 30 years, even before China became as big a threat for the United States as the United States perceives it to be now. Much before that, at a time when the US actually believed that the Chinese will become a kind of a mirror image of the United States, that they will become something very different from what they are. Even when the US had romantic notions about China, even at that point of time, our relations with the United States had started growing. But I think now the Chinese have done us a favor by lending greater urgency to the US-India partnership. I think we must thank Xi Jinping for what he has done. His belligerence, his bullying countries, his expansionism, all of that, I think, has been a shot in the arm for India-US relations, and these relations are going forward. Now, clearly the Chinese have ruffled a lot of feathers. You would remember when Quad first came into existence, which was it was being spoken about almost 15 years back, there wasn't much interest, neither in Japan nor in Australia. Even India and the US were somewhat lukewarm towards it. Look at Quad today. Look at the number of areas in which cooperation is growing between the two countries. It's not just defense and technology issues. It's a whole range of other issues, including supply chains, including many new frontier technologies, including things like cooperation in infrastructure development, in this whole concept of global south and how to bring it up. So when you look at the sheer breadth of the relationship between India and US, or India and United States and its allies, I think it's a completely different world today than what it was maybe 10 years back or even 5 years back.
And perhaps,
we need to look at it from that point of view.
Yes, Abhishek, there is realization in the United States, India perhaps is the only country in the world that's standing up to China, and how, whether it was Doklam in 2017 or Galwan in 2020, and it continues. India refuses to buckle under Chinese pressure, and that is why India has to be strengthened in American national interest.
Well, definitely, Gaurav, there are a lot of strategic interests when it comes to whatever we are seeing between the two countries, and how several deals have been signed up. A lot of thrust on defense that we've already discussed here, also on high-tech new systems, semiconductors. All these are strategic, deals. It's not just trade between two countries.
Yes.
So that's something that that the US is looking very closely at when they want to enhance cooperation with India. And one thing is very noteworthy, Gaurav. Since the tussle in Ladakh, LAC, not just China, particularly LAC, has found a lot of references in official US discourse. Time and again, we've seen Department of Defense reports of America that have mentioned aggressive maneuvering by China, particularly at the line of actual control, references to Ladakh, the expanding villages that they have across the LAC. And in fact, recently there is a senatorial committee report of Foreign Affairs that condemns these kind of Chinese aggression at the line of actual control. So very clearly, whatever developments have happened at the line of actual control, US believes they can be, exploited to enhance this cooperation that US is now seeking with India.
Shift supply chains either out of China or at least have additional supply chains so that China cannot hold the world to ransom like it did post-COVID in 2020. That appears to be one of the key result areas, and India is the best India is not just the best place with a young population, with an educated English-speaking population, but a government that says they're ready for all these businesses to shift out of China or at least have additional businesses in India. So during the second leg, this is the Washington DC leg of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, he's met prominent tech czars in DC. He's held detailed conversations about how Indian interests, American interests and interests of democracies can actually be aligned to ensure that the global supply chain is not disrupted again.
Intimate dinner. Key bilateral meet. Technological collaborations. And big-ticket tech talks. Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US is high on substance. A visit that offers an opportunity to the United States to strengthen its economic and security cooperation with India. Ahead of the intimate dinner with US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden, Modi met leading tech czars in Washington, D.C. In a series of high-profile back-to-back meetings, Prime Minister Modi met Gary E. Dickerson, the president and CEO of semiconductor giant Applied Materials, inviting his company to boost the chip-making ecosystem in India.
We will be announcing soon a new innovation center in India. With Applied Materials, we'll also bring global partners into this new innovation center. And this innovation center will really be focused on innovation in the equipment. And we have very high confidence that working together with India, we can create a tremendous success.
Amid jet engine deal buzz, PM Modi met the chairman and CEO of General Electric, H. Lawrence Culp Jr. GE is likely to sign a pact with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited to manufacture jet engines in India. Prime Minister Modi also met Sanjay Mehrotra, the president and CEO of American chipmaker Micron Technology. During the meeting, Modi invited Micron Technology to manufacture semiconductors in India.
Had an excellent meeting with Prime Minister Modi. Very impressed with the vision that he has for India and the advances that India is making. We discussed a wide range of topics, and we really look forward to greater opportunities in India.
Modi had earlier met Tesla chief and Twitter owner Elon Musk, who described himself as a Modi fan and expressed willing to invest in India.
He really wants to do the right thing for India. He wants to be open, he wants to be supportive of new companies, and obviously, but at the same time, make sure it accrues to India's advantage, which is, obviously, that's the job. I'm saying I am a fan of Modi, so I have to say that.
Modi's active wooing of global businesses of the future can potentially redefine business ties with the US. With Geeta Mohan and Rahul Kanwal in Washington, D.C., Bureau Report, India Today.
So we have some details of what all is likely to happen. Information that's just coming in. There is to be an agreement on semiconductors. So there's chip manufacturing in India, and this is huge with Micron Tech. It's a joint investment of close to $2.7 billion. That's the information that's coming in. There's a testing plant that's likely to be set up in Gujarat. Then the MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones. The deal is likely to be announced by the Prime Minister and the US President together. The Americans are describing it as a trailblazing deal. That is the GE-414 engines. There's also a conversation about US Navy ships being repaired in India, and this Artemis Accord on space exploration, a joint mission to the International Space Station. General Hasnain, when you look at the length and breadth of the kind of agreements that are likely to happen, this isn't just restricted to defense and strategy. This is actually science, technology, people to people, in terms of American professors coming to teach in Indian universities and more Indian students studying in the United States of America, sir.
No doubt, Gaurav. This is absolutely mind-boggling, because of the list you just read out completely would also demand a tremendous backup of human resources. If I can recall, the route which China took from 1978, where they gave a tremendous priority to technical education alongside the infusion of the induction of technology. This is the same methodology which is being looked at here, and we will need a tremendous amount of human resources if we have to take all these deals forward. I would like to always caution ourselves, the strategic community in India, that while we get excited by all this, we must recall that there have been times in the past when we have signed great deals, but we have not been able to exploit them and take them to their natural conclusion. The nuclear deal, for example, the nuclear supplies deal, for example, was something which did not become the transformational deal that we were expecting at that particular time. But this is very, very exciting. There's no doubt about it. These are the first time you find actual trust. This is the actual manifestation of the political, the international, the geopolitical trust that must emerge between India and the United States if they are to become strategic partners to counter the rise of China.
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right, sir. In fact, we have now this breaking news coming in. The news that's just coming in from Washington, D.C. is that the restricted bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the U.S. President Joe Biden is over. The U.S. President is now participating in an expanded bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the delegation. And some of the members of the delegation, as far as the U.S. delegation is concerned, is Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, Lloyd Austin, Secretary Defense, Gina Raimondo, Secretary Commerce, there's Energy Secretary, there's of course Jake Sullivan, Assistant to the President on National Security Affairs, Eric Garcetti is America's ambassador, the American ambassador to India. Let me also tell you more about the Indian side that's participating in this information that's coming in right now. Dr. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, Ajit Doval, National Security Advisor, Vinay Mohan Kwatra, Foreign Secretary, Taranjit Singh Sandhu, Ambassador to the United States of America, and other names of the Indian delegation in this bilateral meeting. Much more on the story. Rahul Kanwal in conversation with Ro Khanna, because now the focus will shift on to the Prime Minister's address at the US Congress. Of course, there is a lot of deals to be announced before that, but let's listen in to Rahul Kanwal.
I want to go across now, live and exclusive, to one of the biggest friends of India here in the United States. Congressman Ro Khanna now joins us. We're right outside the White House, where at the Oval Office, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with American President Joe Biden, and amongst the movers and shakers working behind the scenes to make this visit possible and to make it the kind of success that it's been is the man who's now with us live on India Today News Track. Congressman Khanna, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the kind of effort that you've made in trying to build the relationship between India and the US. As somebody who's played such an important role in this visit by the Indian Prime Minister, could you begin by giving us your sense of what you think is the biggest takeaway from Prime Minister Modi's state visit to the US?
Well, first of all, welcome to the United States. It was extraordinary to see almost 3,000 people on the White House lawn, and of course the galleries are going to be packed, as is the House, when the Prime Minister comes and addresses the United States Congress later today. I believe the enthusiasm for the relationship is grounded on common interests and common values, a defense interest to make sure that China doesn't emerge as a hegemon in Asia or threaten the sovereignty of nations, an interest in solving climate and solving scientific issues together, and an interest economically in partnering to make sure that our workers and our companies succeed.
I was seeing that in California, you've been facing some pushback on account of the role that you've played in trying to build the India-America relationship. Do you want to talk a bit about that, this criticism that's being flung the way of President Biden, and how he's been able to, leave what the naysayers are saying on the side and really focus on what can be done to take the India-America relationship to the next level?
Well, I have faced criticism for helping play a role in inviting the Prime Minister to address Congress. But I have the same philosophy as President Obama, which is that you talk to leaders, especially of allies, and no country agrees with everything. Of course, it's important to respect human rights, and it's important for India's own cohesion to embrace pluralism, and that is part of a conversation with India. But to have that conversation, you have to engage with the leaders and respect the leaders, and that is what this is about. So I don't think that the criticism is justified.
Also the fact that there's been so much component around transfer of technology in sensitive areas from the United States to India. What do you think has allowed for this to happen? Is it the common threat that both Washington and New Delhi see in Beijing, which is allowing for things like the purchase of the GE 414 jet engines to go through with a component of transfer of technology, which otherwise would have been very difficult to make happen?
Well, some of us have been leading for years to have India treated as a non-NATO major partner. I've been working with Senator Warner and going to be introducing that again. I think those efforts have paid off, as has this administration, where we're getting the jet engine deal done, where India now has access to the latest technology. And India is recognizing that the Russian equipment doesn't work, so they also are more incentivized to build the relationship with the United States.
Well, it's not just the view of the Biden administration, because we've seen with the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal with Australia got caught up in congressional approvals. Now that the administration has given its consent for the purchase of the GE jet engines, do you think that there will be adequate bipartisan support on the transfer of high-end technology to India, or do you think that could get stuck in Washington's long and laborious political process?
Well, as co-chair of the India caucus, I will be working hard to make sure that it doesn't get bogged down in the congressional process. This is also why I'm introducing with Senator Warner the resolution to treat India not just as a strategic trade partner, which it is, but as a non-NATO defense partner off the rank of a Japan or an Australia. But I think people in the Congress get it. They understand that we need this defense partnership, that it is critical for India's own border security, and it helps American interests. It helps our ability to gather intelligence in Asia. It helps our ability to make sure no country emerges as a hegemon in Asia. It helps us to diversify our economic interests, not to be dependent solely on China for our manufacturing, but to have a more diversified Asian hub.
Where next to? India and the United States have made substantial progress in deepening their ties during Prime Minister Modi's state visit to the US. What do you see as being the next part of this continuing journey?
Well, I think this is going to be critical. I'm hopeful that members of Congress then will, of course, visit India. India will be hosting the G20. The president, I hope, will go there, and cabinet members will continue to go there. The people-to-people relationship is so important. We need to have more scientific research together. We need to work and have better economic ties that are actually benefiting the United States, because unlike China, we don't have a massive trade deficit with India. India is buying things from the United States. That's creating jobs in the United States. So I hope we can strengthen that, continue to strengthen the defense ties.
Congressman Khanna, for joining us on this broadcast as we broadcast live from inside the White House. Thank you very much. Thank you for the work that you've done towards building this relationship, and we look forward to seeing where things go from here. Thank you for taking out time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So the United States is very clear. Cannot bank on China, cannot let China continue to take the world for a ride like China did post-COVID 2020, diversify supply chains. Now that's advantage India. We are looking at these images, live images that are coming in from the White House. This is where the press conference or the statements will be made both by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President Joe Biden. Agreements will be exchanged after this bilateral, this extended bilateral that is currently on, and I believe a couple of questions will be taken. But Sushant Sareen, you heard Ro Khanna there, and the United States appears to be very clear. China is the problem. You don't want a hegemon in this area, and China is not just a threat for India. Sushant Sareen, we've been saying this all along. The Americans finally seem to have realized this, that China is a threat not just for India, but for the entire democratic free world. And if not checked now, it will threaten America in a very big way in the coming decades.
Gaurav, you know, to be fair to the Americans, they were not the only ones who were taken in by the Chinese. I think we too fell for, you know, this whole nonsense of the peaceful rise of China. Even though we had our concerns with, you know, what the Chinese were doing, the growing Chinese power, but I think somewhere along the line there was a sense in India that, you know, everything will remain hunky-dory between the two countries. Nobody, or at least the Chinese, will not push things over the edge, which clearly they have done. They have been pressing us consistently over the last 20-25 years. What their strategy against us has been that, you know, they catch us in these petty little things, this Sajid Mir, holding on to, you know, the designation of terrorists or a couple of other stuff like this, and then they will give in after some time, but in return they'll try and look for something bigger, you know. So I think it is important for us to not get caught up into this nonsense which the Chinese are trying to foist on us, number one. Number two, I personally think that we cannot and we should not try and match the Chinese gun for gun, tank for tank, missile for missile. I think we need to rethink how we are going to stop the Chinese, how we are going to counter them. And I think we have some very smart people in the military who can do it. But having said that, a closer partnership with the Americans, I think, is something which really works very well for us as well as for the Americans. Does that mean that we are going to open a second front in the case the Chinese open a front somewhere else against the Americans? I don't think we've reached that stage yet.
Okay.
We might in the future. But I think for now, the fact that if we are able to, what General Hasnain was also saying, and I think that is something which people need to take very seriously. You know, in the old days, Rahul, I don't remember if you knew that old hockey rule that there used to be a D, and the Indian players were very adept at taking the ball up to the D, but never being able to convert it into a goal. You know, the same thing is happening in many of the, you know, economic deals which we are striking. Many of the investments that we are trying to attract, we take the ball into the D, and at the last minute we falter. General Hasnain gave the example of the nuclear deal. I could give you many others, and I think we need to really raise up our act so that we can actually become the very attractive investment destination which we are, which is something which will give us technology, not because we are going to negotiate for it, but in the natural course of things. You know, this constant refrain which we have transfer us the technology. That's nonsense. We should not even be looking for it. We will develop the technology once our people get trained. You know, when these investments come in, people start working on it. We have bright people. They will develop our own technologies.
Sure.
You know?
But isn't that the effort?
Experience.
Isn't that the effort right now? Take what you get, Abhishek. And when it comes to China, Abhishek, you know, clearly Pakistan is no longer a threat for us. And if you notice, nobody is talking about Pakistan because I think post Balakot, Abhishek, there's a realization the only weapon Pakistan had in its arsenal was terror, and India knows how to punish that terror. That punishment, that gap that we've had with China, I think the desperation is to reduce that gap to be able to ensure that China does not do any more salami slicing of our territory.
Gaurav, in the last few years, there are very few stories of big shows that we've done focusing on Pakistan, isn't it? Our focus has been China in our newsroom, and a very similar thing has been seen when it comes to your military leadership, your political leadership. Pakistan is almost off the discourse, as you said now. The reason for that is what China has been up to, not just in Ladakh since 2020, but we had Doklam before that, and 2013 Depsang.
Yes.
And it's the Depsang ghost that is still bothering you now, because whenever you talk to them and you say that, you know, you need to leave Depsang, retreat from here, China just goes into a dilly-dallying mode and says this is a legacy issue and things like that. So intentions are very clear, and every aspect of India's security strategy now begins with how we need to deal with China, which wasn't the case a little earlier.
That's the immediate threat. That's the immediate threat, General Hasnain. Closing this gap. There was a huge gap between India and China when it came to defense. As you know better, you've served so extensively along the line of actual control. But with these GE-414 engines or the MQ-9 Sea Guardian drones for ISR or over-the-horizon intelligence gathering, how much of the gap are we closing in terms of, one, intelligence sharing with America, two, getting anti-submarine warfare equipment? What more do we need to do with America, with other democracies to ensure that we are stronger to take on China's salami slicing?
See, Gaurav, this can't be a one-time affair. Whenever you're doing transformation, particularly, it has to be a progressive thing which must take place over generation or 2 generations at least. This is how the United States developed it. After 1990, after the Gulf War, all the lessons learned from the Gulf War, the United Nations carried out its own transformation. The Indian transformation should have taken off in 2004, 2005, got delayed by a couple of years, 10, 11 years almost. So today, I'm looking at the deals that we are talking about just now primarily as triggers. And there's no doubt that if they substantially reach the stages of finalization, and finally you find in about 2 years or 3 years all this technology coming in, many of them off the shelf, being able to be able to purchase them, definitely is going to close the gap. But as someone very clearly and correctly said, let's not chase parity. Let's try reducing and diluting asymmetry. That is the principle. The concept should be to try and dilute the asymmetry so that our levels of deterrence, what is dissuasion today, must rise to deterrence tomorrow. We must be able to train our human resource capabilities all along the northern borders too at the same time. There are vulnerabilities galore all over. It's not that 5 or 6 deals are going to close down all these vulnerabilities. This has to be a progressive thing, and I think a very good direction has been taken by this visit.
Okay, I want to once again cut across to White House and show you those images of that press conference room. We see some movement happening there. Officials are slowly coming in, and journalists have been asked to take their seat, to take their places. Officials are already in a moment from now. The moment delegates come in, then you know that that press conference or that statement will be there any moment.